Feel the heart. Experience the soul. Community Pulse.
Welcome back to Community Pulse on the radio 786 100.4 FM. The time now is 9 minutes after 11 o'clock. We are in our third and final hour together this morning. This hour, it is Wednesday. This hour is reserved for social justice. I have in studio with me Sister Mahbooba Davids. In today's edition of Social Justice, we continue our conversation on pathways to sexual courtesy. This is part 4 of our conversation. A topic of discussion today is the God-ordained uses of sex. Now, a reminder that if you are tuning in for the first time, the Pathways to Sexual Courtesy program is a response to the proposed comprehensive sex education curriculum to be implemented into our schools in South Africa in the new year. We have identified, people have displayed the unease and the uncertainty with regards to this curriculum being introduced as well, and so we are now providing an alternative for you as a parent, as an educator, as a guardian of young children. This is an alternative means of education for you to educate those young ones. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Mahbooba.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sister Qadira.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm very well, alhamdulillah, on this windy summer's day.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. We always say alhamdulillah. The wind gets to us sometimes, but we love it nonetheless, as long as the sun is shining.
Absolutely.
Definitely. All right, Sister Mahbooba, last week we, quickly recap. This is part 4. So far, we have identified, the missing dimension in sex education. We have identified the lack in education from our religious spaces. We've also, and last week in part 3, this is what we covered. We covered circumcision and its link to masturbation. All right. And so a reminder to all of you who are tuned in to join our conversation via WhatsApp 0786 10 11 12. We don't take any calls during this particular segment just because of the nature of the topic. It's very easy to get lost in it. But send your messages through via WhatsApp. Send your questions through via WhatsApp 0786 10 11 12. You can even voice note us. And if time allows within this segment, we will get to them. If not, then we will get to them in the next one, inshallah. And so Sister Mahbooba, last week, and we had quite a bit of feedback from our listeners, and shukran so much to all of you for engaging with us and interacting with us on our topic of discussion last week, circumcision and its link to masturbation. And we had our feedback was, we got feedback of all kinds. We've got feedback of all kinds. There were people who were unhappy with the content that we were putting out there, with the the alternative ideas and the alternative thoughts that we were putting out there. And naturally, if this is a topic that is generally uncomfortable for our community, and so we understand your discomfort with it, but at the same time, it is very necessary, particularly in today's day and age, to be having these kinds of conversations. And today's conversation might be equally as not upsetting, but might be equally as uncomfortable for our listeners. But like I said, these are conversations that need to happen, and we have to be having these conversations.
Sister Qadira. It's also very challenging for me also, really, to talk about it, Sister Qadira. And but we really have to look at this particular concept of sex and sexuality from an intellectual level as well as a spiritual level.
Yes.
You see, and then it actually starts giving us meaning, and why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually so serious about it,
yes.
And why the thing that the same thing that he has made sacred can be easily turned into a sin, right?
Yeah.
So, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin, Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil mursalin, Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina wa Maulana Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to our respected listeners. Yes, indeed, Sister Qadira. Last week we covered masturbation and the meaning behind male circumcision, right? And we've learned that the practice has much more than health and sanitary benefits, but it also has moral and spiritual benefits as well. And what we need to understand, Sister Qadira, is that every ritual that we perform without a sincerity, without purpose, without intention, remains an empty ritual.
Yes.
Right? And that is why one of the listeners could actually argue the point that even though we spoke about male circumcision and how that actually prevents also, or should prevent the male from engaging into how he, be conscious of how he uses that his male member. You know what I mean? That he could argue by saying that, what are you talking about? You know, because all my nephews and my cousins have been circumcised, but they were all guilty of fornication and adultery.
Yes.
You see, because we didn't really put the meaning behind it. Right? So shukran once again for the listeners, for the positive feedback from men and women every time when I bump into people and the listeners, and they really, really thank us for really bringing this particular topic to the table. Right? So, but before I get into the program today, Sister Qadira, I just want to conclude the discussion that we had last week with regards to masturbation being haram in the sight of Allah, and also having given the reasons why because it's psychologically as well as emotionally harmful. And but before we continue, I just want to share with the listeners some guidelines for releasing a person from the habit of masturbating. So there's 3 points that we can look at, Sister Qadira, as where the person who is actually in the habit of doing so, he can strengthen his willpower. And this is possible only if one honestly and sincerely want to get rid of this particular habit. He can pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help him overcome this habit, concentrate on religious teachings, and build up the spirit of taqwa and piety. Right? And secondly, he can actually what he can do is stay in the company of other persons. Right? And if in the daytime, if you feel like doing so or doing the act, get up from your bed or your chair and get into the presence of other people and talk to them. That means channel your energy, in another direction. And if it happens at bedtime, sit up in bed and write a letter or read a book. So shift your energy. Right?
Yes.
And do something to switch your mind onto other things. And also adopt some hobby or sports which will provide you with an outlet for energies of your body. So here's actually 3 points or 3 recommendations how this person can actually release himself from the habit. Right?
Now, Sister Mubiba, before you carry on, the question has come through once again, and I assume that it would, Last week we raised the point that everybody always says that masturbation is haram. But nobody ever says why it's haram. And the question has come through. Assalamu alaikum. Can you just recap why masturbation is haram?
It's haram because it is about allowing the mind really to, and also not the mind but the imagination, really to go to a particular point where it actually leads this person to do that particular act. So it is actually psychologically and emotionally harmful to the person, right? Because in order for you to do the particular act, Sister Qadira, people actually watch pornography or they watch certain images, that will actually arouse the libido, right? And we know that Islam is about refining the libido. Right? Controlling the libido. Right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows our nature. And also because we are living not in a clean society. Our environment is not clean. It is filled with all these images and what it does also can do to the human mind, Sister Qadira. But that's why we said that the person can actually strengthen his or her willpower. Right? Because even later in the program, we will learn also when people actually fornicate, Sister Qadira, when they enter into sexual relations before marriage, that's also a form of masturbation. You understand what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah. So that is also haram. And Islam or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create the human being for self-pleasure.
Yes.
He created us for us to actually to give each other pleasure. You understand what I mean? I hope that is clear to the listener, right? So today I really want to touch on the Allah ordained uses of sex.
Okay.
Right? In the light of the problems that we have today, Sister Qadira. You know, look at the high percentage of teen pregnancies that we have. You know, and then the advice has been given like use.
Feel the heart. Experience the soul. Community Pulse.